With a rebel yell, folks, I am the Mighty Plantain. Thanks for checking out this video. This time, we've got Samuel Adams' Pack of Rebels. Love the Rebel IPAs. Ever since the original Rebel IPA has come out, it's been great. Unfortunately, this pack doesn't contain the Rebel Rouser, which is their double IPA, the Rebel, I believe it was called Rider, which was the Session IPA, or the Rebel Raw, which I believe was it was unfiltered, but I believe it was a double IPA or an Imperial IPA. It's been a little while since I've had it. All great beers, but in this one we've got the Grapefruit, the Juiced IPA, and the brand new Rebel White Citra IPA. Is in addition to the regular Rebel IPA. So hopefully four solid beers. I think I've had the Grapefruit and the Juiced. Yes, I have done the Grapefruit and the Juiced before. I don't know if I've posted those reviews, but pretty decent beers. The the White Citra should be new and interesting. Now, my original thought to line these up was to go in my anticipated intensity of flavor, which meant I would have gone with the Juiced, the Grapefruit, then the regular Rebel, and the Citra, but I wasn't 100% solid on that. When I looked at the labels, I noticed that the IBUs lined up pretty good with well, it was the Rebel, then the Citra, and then the Juiced and the Grapefruit. They're not listed on the box, but I believe that was how I planned on lining them up. So that's the way I'm going to go. Hit me up in the comments and email link down below if you have different thoughts on that, if you think the lineup was correct or incorrect, or if I could have done it a little differently. But I think when I'm on the cusp there, going by the IBUs is probably the better bet. I will be cleansing with water in between each beer, as always, but I'm not going to subject you to watching that mess. So, without further ado, we're going to start off with the original Rebel IPA. I know these are in the Sam Adams cans, which are designed to not interfere with the flavor of the beer like a lot of cans do, but I'm still going to use a glass for these particular beers because I do like my Rebels, and I think putting them in a glass is just appropriate. Well, got a pretty decent head on that one. Oh, I'm not even going to be able to fit the full can in, so look at that. That is nice and clear, although it does have a nice dark, slightly brownish tinge to an overall yellow beer. Maybe a bit of an amber color, a honey-colored beer, honey or amber. But it is a very nice looking beer, slightly effervescent. It's got a lovely hop aroma. I mean, I'm getting some citrus, some pine. Those are the two that seem to stand out most for me with any type of hop blend. A little bit of earthiness there too, though. Not quite picking up on any floral down the hatch. Mm. 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 So good. I think the Rebel IPA for me is still a perfect IPA. It's just a really great blend. I mean, I'm getting up front, I'm getting those floral, not floral up front, sorry. The piney and citrus notes, but they are fading to floral and earthy notes. I'm getting a lot of really complex flavors there. Each sip is a little bit different. It's kind of dancing on the tongue. There is just enough of a backbone to the beer that it has some body to it. It's got a nice medium light mouthfeel, which makes it smooth and easy to drink. And it's just a really delicious, well put together and perfectly balanced IPA. For me, these are always going to be a 5 out of 5. And the Rebel IPA really, I want to say it's my favorite IPA, but it actually contends with Shipyard, which is a local Maine brewery, their Monkey Fist IPA, which is another really well put together and perfectly blended IPA. The only difference being the Rebel is a little bit bolder, and it has a more in-your-face character to the flavor, whereas the Monkey Fist tends to be a little more mellow and subdued, but still a perfectly balanced IPA. So those two are really vying for the favorite spot for me. But again, the Rebel, 5 out of 5. Great beer, perfect IPA. You should check it out. This one's not going to last long, and I'm going to move on to the White Citra. Alright, so like I said, next up is the Rebel White Citra IPA. Obviously featuring Citra hops. Imagine that. It's right in the name. Trying to be a little less aggressive with this pour. I didn't quite get the whole can in the last one. As I got a little aggressive, put a big head on the regular Rebel, and just barely got the whole can in here. So I guess I'm doing alright on putting a head on these tonight. Always seems to be a struggle for me. It's actually more effervescent and more cloudy than the regular Rebel IPA. It's a little lighter in color, a little more straw colored. But like I said, more cloudy and more effervescent, so that's interesting. Not a big fan of cloudy beers still. I'm learning that it doesn't make a huge difference with the taste, but there's something about having those particulates suspended in there that's just visually off-putting to me. But I've actually learned over time that it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to taste bad or that it's going to be chunky. So it's just a visual thing for me at this point. But I'm still not a huge fan of the cloudy and flocculent beers, because I can actually see particulates floating around in that. It does have a nice crisp aroma to it. Not really picking up on any particular hoppy aromas. Maybe a hint of citrus, go figure, with Citra hops. And again, I did cleanse with water in between, so the palate should be able to pick up on all that stuff, but it's also possible that the hoppiness of the Rebel IPA is kind of overwhelming my sense of smell a little bit. But yeah, I am getting a little hint of citrus in the aroma, but not very strong. Ooh, heavy citrus flavor. Actually a little bit sweet on the back end. That very crisp, refreshing aroma is continuing through in the flavor. But again, up front, it's very citrusy, but then there's a slight hint of sweetness in the finish that's really nice. It's got a medium light mouthfeel. It's actually a little lighter than the regular Rebel. This one's very easy to drink. That's very refreshing too. If you're looking for a good IPA for a nice summer day, that's a great one. I mean, it's got a flavor that's reminiscent of crisp, fresh spring water. Again, pretty citrusy on the hoppiness, but not really anything else coming through there. I hit this one with a 4 out of 5. And just because of its crisp and refreshing drinkability, this one is one that's going to go down really fast and really easy. This would be a great beer to drink on a nice warm day. Or any other time. But the fact that it's really focused on that citrusy hop note for me but the fact that it's also very crisp and refreshing means that it's not really a one-trick pony. And this is, like I said, like fresh spring water with a bit of citrus to it. Really liking it. So again, a 4 out of 5 for me on that one. I'm going to finish it up, and then I'm going to move on to the next beer. That's going to go quick too. Probably, maybe even quicker than the Rebel. Alright, so number 3 is going to be Rebel Grapefruit IPA. Now, a little counterintuitive here. I would have thought that Rebel Grapefruit, obviously being a citrusy juice with citrusy hop blend, would have gone after and last compared to Rebel Juiced IPA, where the Juiced has citrusy hops and mango flavor. But again, the IBUs for the Rebel Juiced IPA are higher than the IBUs for the Rebel Grapefruit. So we're going to do grapefruit first and see how that works out. And here it goes. It's got an interesting color on the pour. As it settles in the glass, it's got a nice golden hue to it. There is a tinge of pink, just a slight tinge, and it might just be the way the light's hitting it in here, but just maybe a very slight tinge of pink to it, but not much. Very subtle. It's pretty effervescent and slightly cloudy, not as flocculent as the Citra, as the White Citra IPA. It's cloudy more than flocculent, because with the White Citra IPA I could actually see the particulates in it, but the particulates are so small that it's just being a cloud. It's just turning into an overall cloudiness. Not as effervescent. The head's actually fading faster than the other two did as well. And there is a significant grapefruit aroma. Without much else coming through. Maybe a bit of crispness, but mostly just a sweet, citrusy grapefruit aroma. It's got a nice medium light mouthfeel. Definitely grapefruit. There's that very tart citrus with a little bit of sweetness that's reminiscent of grapefruit. On the back end, though, it fades to an almost overwhelmingly hoppy bitterness with no particular character to it, almost like a grapefruit rind or grapefruit skin, if you prefer. When I'm thinking negatively of the flavor, though, I think of the rind, because it's just this bitter, aftertaste that's not 100% pleasant, but it's not necessarily bad either. I don't know, maybe it's just following up on the other two, but it's not quite doing it for me. The grapefruit's great, but the finish, the aftertaste and finish on this particular brew is just a bitterness, which, like I said, is like grapefruit rind, and it's not pleasant. Up front, very pleasant. It's got that sweet, citrusy grapefruit flavor. But it's that aftertaste that I just can't quite shake. Pardon. It's not 100% turning me off. It's just, in comparison, like I said, to the other two, it's not as great. So, I think I'm going to hit this one with a 3 out of 5. I'm not as big a fan of the Grapefruit IPA, the Rebel Grapefruit IPA. I can't remember if that's what I rated it as when I first had this or not. I'll have to go back and look. But for tonight at least, in comparison to the other two directly and not drinking it as a standalone, I gotta hit this with a 3 out of 5. And again, bear in mind, on a 1 to 5 scale, a 2.5 is average, so a 3 is a decent beer. Slightly above average, just not really impressing me. But it is well put together and it's decent beer. So I'm going to finish this up, and I'm going to move on to the fourth and final, the Rebel Juiced IPA. Alright, so fourth and finally, Rebel Juiced IPA. Now this one I originally thought was only going to be available on tap in certain locations because it's a combination of juice and the IPA. But it did show up in cans and bottles recently, thankfully. Bit of an aggressive pour there. Easy to put head on then. That's a little bit of a different color. It's a little darker than the others. A little more of a brown hue to it than the yellowish the others. Fairly clear, slightly effervescent. Despite the original pour, there's actually very few bubbles still coming up off of that. Now, despite the fact that this has a higher IBU than the others, it's got less of a hoppy aroma and more of a clean and crisp aroma. Mostly just a nice fresh aroma with a slight hint of hoppiness. No specific notes. Maybe slightly sweet. It's actually very cool and crisp. That's what hits me up front more than anything else, is how cool and crisp it is. It's also got a very nice medium light mouthfeel, just like the others. The hoppiness is very muted, honestly. Behind that cool, crisp taste, there's a hint of mango in the middle, and then it finishes with a nice citrusy pop. Although the hoppiness is kind of muted, as I said, the fact that it has a higher IBU than the others is kind of lost to the fact that the hoppiness is really muted. It's interesting and different. I definitely would give this a I'm going to go 3.5 out of 5. It's interesting. It's got that mango taste to it. The mango is definitely coming through in the middle of the beer. Like I said, up front, you're getting that crisp, cool, refreshing flavor. And it fades to a bit of sweetness followed by a hoppy aftertaste. But the mango's pretty distinct right in the middle there, right before the finish. So definitely different and interesting enough to bring it up to a 3.5 out of 5. If it weren't for that bit of mango coming through, I'd put this closer to a 2.5 out of 3, but the mango's just making it stand out enough to earn it that 3.5 out of 5. So definitely a good variety pack. I'm liking the lineup. Again, the Rebel Rouser, the Rebel Raw, couple of my personal favorites that I'd rather see in a Rebel lineup. Ooh, pardon. But overall, not a bad variety of Rebels. But again, that's just my opinion. I'd like to hear yours. Hit me up in the comments, the email link down below. Let me know what you think of these beers, about the lineup and the order they were drank in, if that's the best way to do it, or if you have a different opinion. I'd also like to hear what you have to say about each individual beer. While you're down there commenting, make sure to hit me up with a like and a share, and click that little subscribe button down there. You'll get a notification every time I post a new video when you subscribe. Till next time, folks, cheers. Now, a little while back, we did a bit of a comparison with the Not Your Father's Hard Root Beer review.
Thanks for having me.
Well, thanks for the beer, man. So, highly recommended by you. The Extreme Beer Fest this weekend. We'll be able to get a hold of, I believe it's the American